This is Window on the World, Kal Tamashaq, blue-veiled guardians of the Sahara, famine of no hope. The Kal Tamashaq, or the people of the Tamashaq, live in the Sahara Desert. Let's talk to Ahmad, who's hoeing between the millet plants over there in the hot sun. Our lives are very different now, Ahmad told us. He pulled his long blue veil across his mouth as he spoke. Slaves used to work in our gardens while we traveled across the desert with our camels, herds, and families. Then came the worst famine we'd ever seen. There wasn't any rain for 6 years, and lots of people and animals starved to death. We called it the famine of no hope. Now we're poor and we don't have slaves to grow our millet and vegetables. At least I still have my own tent. We look over at Ahmad's ragged oval tent made of leather. The tent has been my home for a long time. When I was young, we used to carry our tents and belongings from place to place on the backs of our camels. We were so proud that we were called the Lords of the Desert in our own language. We call ourselves Mashagan, which means noble and free. But now sometimes we feel like God has abandoned us. Proud nomads. The Kal Tamashaq are descendants of the Berbers of North Africa. Hundreds of years ago, the Arabs drove them out of their homeland and south into the Sahara Desert. And the Sahel, even though they were treated this way, the Tamashaq were strong and powerful. They weren't afraid of anyone. It wasn't long before they forced the black Africans who lived in the lands where they settled to become their slaves. The Kal Tamashaq became very rich. They spent their days raiding, trading, and herding. They moved through the desert with their herds of camels, cattle, sheep, and goats. Traders gave the Kal Tamashaq money or other valuables to guide and protect them as they traveled across the Sahara between West and North Africa. Everyone was afraid of these blue-veiled guardians of the desert, but they weren't afraid of anyone. When France took control of a large area of West Africa in the 19th century. They banned raiding, which had always been a part of the Tamashaq way of life. They also enforced the boundaries between countries so the Tamashaq couldn't move freely from place to place. The proud Tamashaq weren't so powerful anymore. No longer powerful. The last 50 years have been very hard for the Kal Tamashaq. When Mali became independent from France in 1960, the black Africans in the south of the country took over the Tamashaq, fought the government in a civil war. They were defeated and many of them were killed. The harsh climate defeated them too. There's never much rain in the Sahel, but since the famine of no hope, which lasted from 1968 through 1974, there have been lots of droughts and famines, and thousands of people have died. Many Tamashaq had to abandon their nomadic life and go to refugee camps where they sometimes felt they were treated unfairly. The Tamashaq are Muslims, but because they moved around so much, they didn't build many mosques, and most of them don't keep Ramadan. But while they moved to a new place, a Muslim holy man traveled with them to pray for them until recently. Most of the Tamashaq have never heard about Jesus. Not abandoned. Biga listened carefully to the tape about Jesus. He had never heard such a wonderful story. Did God really love people so much that he sent Jesus, his only Son, to die for them? Was he powerful enough to actually change people's lives? Would he really help them every day? When Biga decided to follow Jesus, some people laughed at him for holding the white man's religion. But it didn't take them long to realize that Biga was a different person because God had changed him. There are still only a few Tamashaq Christians, but they really want to show others that God loves them and will never leave them. When Christian organizations started to send food and aid to Tamashaq, the Christians made sure that the neediest people got their share. How can we follow Jesus too? Some of them wanted to know. Life is very hard, but now we know that God hasn't abandoned us. Fact file. The Kal Tamashaq are often called Tuaregs, which is the French name for them. Countries where they live: Niger, 1,094,000; Mali, 683,000; Burkina Faso, 85,500. There are others living in other Kal Tamashaq people living in Algeria, Libya, Mauritania, and Tunisia. Religion is Islam. Language is Tamashaq. And our other do you know? The blue turban and veil, litham, that the Tamashaq man wears is about 6 yards long. He covers his mouth with his veil when he meets anyone he respects, and when he eats, he uses his left hand to lift the veil from his mouth. To help you pray for the Kal Tamashaq, you can thank God for the few Tamashaq who follow Jesus. You can thank God for the parts of the Bible that have been translated into Tamashaq. You can ask God to help the many Tamashaq people who are very poor. You can ask God that Christian workers would show his love and care to the Tamashaq. You can ask God for more evangelists, pastors, and missionaries who can show the Tamashaq that they're important to him, and who can teach Christians how to follow Jesus. You can ask God to give Tamashaq Christians the courage to tell others about how he has helped them, he meaning God. You can ask God to send enough rain each year so they'll have enough food for themselves and their animals.